When it comes to anime in general, I enjoy the medium a lot and have a few of them that I have a pretty big soft spot for. People can feel how they want and say what they want about it, but in my opinion, liking anime is completely fine, and it really only comes down to what your preferences in shows are. I don't really talk about anime or anything like that on this channel because while I do enjoy them, I can't say that I'm exactly that well versed in it as many enthusiasts might be. I like talking about the ones that I do know, but I rarely go out of my way to just watch any anime. So when the topic of genres that I'm not exactly that familiar with, like comedy or slice of life anime comes up, I really don't have much to say because I haven't actually watched many that moved me. Some of them were decently fun watches, but aside from that, I don't really feel that compelled to talk about any of them. Except for one. I bet there's a bunch of people that'd be upset to hear that I will gas up Nichijou, but say that I haven't watched many within the same genre. And to that I say, I don't really know what you're mad about. I like Nichijou a lot. So much so that I'm here making this video talking about the show, but I could be making that CS video that people who watch my previous videos would rather watch instead. However, despite that fact, this does not mean I don't have any respect for other shows that are similar to it or are within the same category of anime. I remember seeing someone discussing if Nichijou or Azumanga Daioh were the better of the shows, and when it comes to that argument, all I really had to say was that both are pretty cool. I just happened to get to Nichijou first, so I have a soft spot for it. Who knows, maybe I wouldn't have found Azumanga if it wasn't for Nichijou. Though, thinking about it now, without Azumanga is an internet culture, I probably would have found it someday.
Oh my god!
Anyway, I don't want to have to deal with people feeling like I'm being ignorant to other shows just because I gave spotlight to one that a lot of people talk about. So if you hear this and you still feel as if I'm trying to act like Nichijou is the best thing in the universe compared to all of them, then you can gladly go ahead and comment something and give me free engagement since I'd greatly appreciate it. That being said, Nichijou is one of the anime in the genre that I have seen myself that I actually hold to high regard. In fact, this is probably one of my favorites in anime as a whole simply because of what it does. It doesn't focus on a specific romance, in fact it's not really a rom-com at all, and it doesn't really do anything exactly complex with its identity either. Honestly, I would say what Nichijou does is pretty simple considering how it ends up working out in each scene. Because of that, I feel that's why Nichijou sits right with a lot of the audience that it has built up. And yet you might be asking yourself, how come I've never heard or watched it? By word of mouth, funny moment compilations, and just discussion videos about the anime, Nichijou is recognized by a lot and has been talked about, don't get me wrong. However, despite these videos getting hundreds of thousands, hell, even millions of views and being recognized as a potential top 25 anime of the 2010s, Nichijou as an anime still sits in a more niche, cult-like status simply because it never really blew up when it initially released. Being considered a commercial failure, Nichijou did pretty poorly in terms of sales and the manga never really got fully adapted and it eventually got cancelled to cut costs. People ask to this day for the series to come back, which goes to show how much it was inevitably recognized by so many, though it's unlikely that these prayers will even see the light of day. Despite that, I'll still discuss what I love about this show, because it's not as though there's nothing to be appreciative of when what's left of the anime still exists and is genuinely high quality stuff. With that out of the way, I suppose this is a part of the video where I begin to delve into the really monotonous, boring specifics of how Nichijou came to be and how it was animated. And listen, I think that stuff is just as interesting and important to know in correlation to everything I'm about to discuss, but I'm nearly 100% sure you would rather hear me yap about the anime itself already and do your literature research on your own time. If you clicked on the video yourself and didn't stumble on this video through like autoplay or something, you would notice I use the phrasing abnormality and normality or something along the lines and might question what that exactly means. In comedy and slice of life, there's always that relatability on what the characters go through, and the interesting part comes in when you see them react in ways that either resonate with you personally or are so far-fetched that you just can't help but laugh and say, what the fuck? So in a sense, a lot of shows kind of do this thing where characters might act in ways that you may have never even expected but kind of understand, to scenarios that are really nothing short of average, everyday happenings, or very memorable moments of our lives that seem to resonate with others as well. On top of that, with Nichijou not really having a crazy overarching plot that it follows to the very end, these moments are one of the pillars of what keeps you watching, knowing that you'd want to believe that Nichijou has quite a bit of work to get done if it wants to use moments like these a lot. But I feel shows haven't actually done this in a way that Nichijou has, where not only is it half of the show, its clever use of these concepts to further amplify the absurdity of some of these characters' personalities and their habits is what makes it so interesting. For example, Yuko Aioi is one of the main characters of the show, and you're introduced to her very early on. In the first moment of the show, you are immediately able to understand that Yuko's luck is haphazard. A lot of times things just happen to her in the craziest display of dramatic irony, to the point where you really gotta question if there's a god up above that's tormenting her. Now, some of the stuff that happens to her may or may not be her fault, since she's generally a slacker and a bit clumsy when it comes to doing her work, and she even has a gag where she paces around her room trying to finish up her homework last minute. But aside from that, a lot of times she is put in a situation where she can almost never win. When you look at what happens to her and apply it to things that might happen to you, Yuko is essentially a character almost entirely influenced by the idea of these events, trying to go by life easygoing, and still getting the short end of the stick half the time. It doesn't help that Yuko tends to be quite out there with her personality sometimes, while still retaining moments of being normal to a degree. With that being said, the characters of Nichijou are really what hold some of these moments together, as characters like Yuko can have such a really simple concept and turn the dial for absurdity way up whenever it calls for it. It's not just her either. There are characters like Mai Minakami who are incredibly mysterious and are made even more mysterious by their inexplicable and almost random behavior. Mio Naganohara, who is normally nice but can have a short fuse when it comes to dealing with Yuko's idiocy while bearing a very odd hobby, and Nano Shinonome, who is a human robot with pretty much all the features of what makes a human human, and is made by a child who hasn't even hit double digits in their age yet. I'll get back to Nano when I can, since there's more I'd like to talk about in relation to her, but there are other characters I haven't mentioned who make the world of this anime shockingly lively. Now that we understand that, you might be wondering how this all works out if there's no real plot to really keep you coming back. For a lot of viewers, the various factors that hook us in the next episode is that sweet, sweet plot that we hope doesn't shamefully disappoint us in the end. And so for a lot of people that rely on this to actually enjoy a show, it might feel really unjustified to bother with comedy anime or slice of lives that work like this, since it really just feels like you're watching, another person's life for pretty much no reason. With Nichijou being one of them, I'd say that the fact this anime has no overarching plot doesn't actually affect its quality or its ability to hook you in any meaningful way. Remember the abnormal and the normal that I was talking about and made the title of this video? The reason I feel Nichijou fits that description quite well is because throughout all of the things it puts the characters through, there's a bunch of it that is just normal stuff that happens to a lot of us one way or another, just completely turned up to 11 because of the characters that are involved. We already know how Yuko's tragic luck and easygoing personality nets her some of the more comedic and iconic scenes in the show. But there are quite a bit of others that I feel people could relate to one way or another, either based on the personality of the characters and how they might react to certain things, or the scenarios that they're put through. Youthful romance that is exaggerated through outbursts of gunfire, losing your wallet in a public place and feeling your very soul be stripped from your body as the realization hits. And let's not mention having a friend who asks for your help for something that you really don't want to help out with, so you just completely troll them by screwing up their whole work. No? Just me? Oh shit, well, alright. The point is, Nichijou has this very strong ability to make such relatable everyday things that people go through and dramatize it in such a satisfying way. Being able to put ourselves in the shoes of these characters makes us understand that maybe their reactions are more understandable than we might think. Going through what seems like the most unlucky event ever and having to scream about it internally because of how ridiculous it is isn't actually something super uncommon. We've all been there one way or another, but seeing a character take that experience and have their own little breakdown makes that boring part of your life seem so exaggerated when you think about it in relation to what you see. At multiple points in this video, I said that these characters are absurd, and while that could be the case, I think a better way to describe it is that they're very expressive and exaggerated at times. Honestly, a lot of these characters are pretty normal people for the most part, but the level of expression that they have is something that you would definitely only see in anime, which makes it achieve that sense of being out there while retaining the qualities of life we're familiar with. Nichijou makes you realize that in life you'll go through very regular things that you may look at and think nothing of it. And because of that, you begin to feel bored of doing the same thing over and over again, or be irritated by the same issues that seem to never find another person to bother but you. These seemingly boring moments happen, and it's just as fleeting as a smile you get when you think about how absurd it is. And because of that, it's easy to forget that even with an ordinary life, we experience things that become normal simply because it's to be expected. You yourself are not always going to be the everyday average person, nor are all of the people that you are going to meet in life. I'm sure at some point, or sometime in the future, experience happen and you would react in a way that is entirely unique to you, or you're with someone who makes that situation even more ridiculous, because they're just as unique of an individual as you are. Being average is something that we can label ourselves if we don't find any outstanding things about us, but there's always something that makes the way you interact with life so different despite being something that happens to everyone. For an anime that is my ordinary life, it does take it to heart in that it really isn't anything that we haven't thought of before or seen at some point. But having these exuberant characters play out these moments make it also entertaining that we begin to forget it was ever an ordinary situation to begin with. So for what it's worth, whether you think of the show as something that's super random or just the perfect amount of normal, you'd be right to at least notice and feel that there's a part of the show that you can familiarize yourself with, even if you're not too keen on Japanese culture. Now, I could end this segment here and move on to talking about some other stuff relating to animation, music, and I don't know, maybe the manga as well, but there's one more thing I want to touch on before I move on. Remember earlier how I said I wanted to talk more about Nano and her character? Well, I think her spot in the show really brings this idea of abnormal in the normal full circle, and that's because her small development as a character is something that I think a lot of people can relate to despite what she is. Like I said before, Nano is a robot. She was created by a girl who goes by Hakase Shinonome, and they both live in the Shinonome household. Now, already, it's insane how the circumstances of all of this look. Creating a human robot while being a young child is one thing, but a robot that couldn't be distinguished from human or not without the absurd key on her back is probably the craziest part. Nano acts just as human as you would expect from anyone. She has her quirks about herself and how her personality is, and she even enjoys watching an unhealthy amount of TV at night because she gets so invested in a show. So for all intents and purposes, Nano might as well be human, right? Well, in the beginning, Nano wasn't exactly sure of that at all. In fact, she was always self-conscious about the fact that she was so obviously not normal and had a whole ass key on her back. You can see she wants to be normal in the actions that she does and the things she says, and how she reacts to things, but is always worried that she will be judged if people were to really see the truth of things. To be fair, it would be pretty hard to explain a tray popping out of your head or telling somebody that the professor that made you installed rocket arm capabilities into you. So, knowing that, Nano insists on getting the professor to remove the key, remove the robot features from her, and make her normal like the rest of the teenagers like her. Hakase would always ignore these requests though, being upset at the fact that Nano would, no longer be, well, a robot. And while that makes her unique, Nano believes that she couldn't be like the other kids going to school if she were to live like this, wishing that she were never a robot in the first place. If it wasn't already obvious, Nano is the representation of that anxiety that we have about ourselves, feeling that if we are to be too different from everyone's expectations, we would be seen as an outcast and looked down upon. At times, coming to terms with the fact that you simply are different from others is hard, especially if your identity is something that you're constantly conscious about. Nano's fear of not being accepted is understandable, not just because she's a literal robot, but also because that crisis is something that we can all come to understand through our own identities. People can be cruel, putting your opinion down because of what your interests and likes are, or because of just who and what you are as a person. And unfortunately, that's something that is probably going to plague our society for a long time. Sometimes people are afraid of something different, and so in the same sense, people are also afraid to be different because of it. Nano's actualization of that is perfect because she exists in such a strange society, even outside of her own identity, and she doesn't even know it. And again, I could go on and on about how much I love this concept, especially in this show, but I'll end it with something that Yuko says to her as she tries to get to know her. Basically, Nano ends up enrolling into school despite being a robot, which goes well, and after getting to know Yuko, Mio, and Mai a bit, Yuko makes the decision to go to her house and get to know her personally. Now, for Nano, this is a nightmare, since now Yuko sees her for who she really is, a robot, and trying to cover up what she saw by giving her excuses, Yuko stops her and simply tells her this.
分かってるって、ナノちゃんがロボじゃないってこと。よいしょっと。ナノちゃんはナノちゃんだし、それでいいんじゃない?
For a character like Yuko to just say something as real as this just makes it so much more impactful, and honestly, watching the show yourself would make you understand exactly what I mean. In the anime, this is like 16 episodes in, so we're already used to the super bizarre and averagely absurd happenings that go on in this world. However, up until this point, Nana was always the central character that was worried about her own identity in comparison to others. It probably didn't help that her first day at school had her being stared at either, but in this world, she felt as though things would be fine if people never really knew who she really was. Yuko coming in to make her understand that she has nothing to be afraid of is so beautiful because for a while now, we'd see the crazy shenanigans that she would get herself up to. If Nano is a representation of our unique selves, the part of us that we reluctantly show or hide from society, Yuko would be the same unique part of society that puts their hand out in accepting who you are. There's always a part in this world that is willing to welcome you for yourself, no matter what. And finding that place is extremely daunting when trying to avoid discrimination and battling your own personal fears. But there's always a place in the world for you. Nichijou's world has so many crazy characters that we ourselves can also just see Nano as just being Nano. We accept her because through everything we've seen in our lives and in the show itself, everyone in this world has something that makes them quite different from the rest. Nano might be a robot, and that's a very unique thing for a character to have, but being ashamed of herself for what she was would only bring down what makes her Nano. And shouldn't that already be enough? If you think about it, Hakase not removing Nano's key and features, which to be fair are really silly, shows that there are people that are happy with who you are and would never want to see you become something that you are not. Something on first glance that seems really childish from Hakase, and we could understand being Nano in that situation where you just want to be normal but are being misunderstood. You can look at it again and be a little on the side of just having Nano be who she is. Nothing will change that she is a robot, and she shouldn't feel that she has to hide it from people if that's really who she is, which goes for everyone watching this as well. If you suffer from feeling alone in this world, feeling that there's things about your identity that you're afraid to show others, let me reassure you that if you put in the time and effort to accept who you are and be okay with being different, you will find peace in life and possibly healthy relationships as well. I myself have dealt with understanding who I was, and if that was something I should really have others see. And the common misstep is feeling like you have no say in the matter. If being yourself is something you really want, then go for it. You'll find that life becomes really comfortable when you're able to live with being in your own skin. That was quite the tone shift, but I believe it was important for you to kind of realize the brilliance of how this show works. Nano, Yuko, Mai, and Mio, and so many other characters fill this world with a whole ton of personality that having something like this to help you realize that life can feel suffocating if you aren't able to allow yourself to be who you really are makes this show so much more real. Nano is something that could really only exist in fiction, and yet we're able to feel like we can be in our own shoes just by our own perceptions of life and ourselves. All in all, this show's ability to have these while being wild with its fast-paced comedy is really something that I can't give full credit to, so I implore you to watch the anime or read the manga yourself to really get what I'm saying. Whew, okay, well that was quite a lot for one section, but to be fair, we had to go through a lot of that because, you know, it's the most integral part of this video. Not to say the animation and music are only honorable mentions. In fact, I think they play a big part too. However, in relation to what this video is, I'd say that, you know, the characters and how the show works itself is a lot more integral to the point that I was trying to make. Moving on to the animation though, I think it goes without saying that this show is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it completely brings Keiichi Arari's art style to life, and the people at Kyoto Animation did God's work with Nichijou. Kyoto Animation had already had a crazy reputation for stellar work when it came to other anime like The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, and they're even currently doing God's work with the animation of City, which is another one of Keiichi Arari's works that he made after Nichijou. And they do the same thing in bringing life to Keiichi's newer art style with its vibrant colors and charmingly cartoonish, yet effectively simple visuals. It's safe to say that these guys knew what they were doing based on what they've done and what they're currently up to, but their work on Nichijou brings it to an absolute next level. Moments in the manga that felt like they couldn't be exaggerated anymore got dealt a crazy hand as almost every frame is brimming with personality. I can't begin to tell you how many scenes are just iconic based on simply how good they look. And even an average scene where not much is happening is just extremely pleasant to look at. Not to mention the charm in how they add motion to Keiichi's still framed work. This is coming from someone who already enjoys reading the manga and appreciating the art there. Watching the anime is actually in a league of its own, and it's crazy to believe there's no animosity in me saying that. It's hard to describe by just telling you and not watching it yourself, because even I am just entertained by the visuals even on my 1 billionth rewatch of it. It sucks to think that it's pretty unlikely that we'll see them return to this series to finish off what the manga has left, but I suppose it really can't be helped. For the music, while it's not exactly standing out in how every melody might move you to the core, I believe this is to its advantage rather than something to be upset about. I won't try to dwell on it for long, but the anime's music with its soothing whistles, wind, and string-based instruments allows you to capture the sense of both calm and chaos within each moment of the show. Now, I'm not gonna act pretentious and give some really in-depth analysis on each track and how the frequencies of each track tells us a story. No. Since I don't believe it needs that to really have you get what I'm trying to say. I mean, okay, just listen to this scene. Even while someone is monologuing to themselves or a dialogue is being had, the music keeps a rhythm that swings into the direction of whatever is going on. The instruments are rarely ever intense, but it doesn't need to be when it's simply there to be a platform to keep you at level with everything that's happening. On top of that, I really do think the very laid-back tracks that sort of have this elegance and grace to every sway in the rhythm just fits perfectly for the idea of average yet not average world. Might be a bit of a stretch to expect you to listen to it outside of its source, but it genuinely is very welcoming to the ears when it is in the background. As we reach the end of this video, I'll go off script a bit and just, talk instead of reading since, I don't know, I really don't feel like typing anymore. With City coming out and being reminded of how really good Keiichi's work is and how much I enjoy Nichijou, this kind of idea that being abnormal is sort of normal kind of just struck to me, or is just something I was really interested in, and I think Nichijou does it really well, and hopefully this video kind of got that point across. In terms of what you can expect of me going forward video wise, I'm not sure I will do like anime and stuff like this often, so if that's something you're looking for, then I'm sorry, but it's not something you'll see week after week. But I do still have the motivation to make videos that I've been planning to make, like, or, you know, earlier I said something about CS. But, you know, if it ever comes to the time where I can make a video about like City or the manga of Nichijou, since I wasn't able to go into too much depth into it here, then I might do it again. Despite what I said about, you know, Nichijou being like this average and the not average kind of show, there are a lot of unique moments in the show that are kind of like exclusive to it, and that makes sense because, you know, with a show of very unique characters, that kind of does happen. And so I do believe if you want to learn more about the show, generally watching it is what you should do, and I think you'll come to not regret it. Comedy and slice of life isn't really for everybody, and honestly I wouldn't really say Nichijou is like slice of life, because a lot of slice of life I see are kind of like, they do have a sort of plot going on where, you know, you kind of go with the developments of certain characters, and, you know, moments kind of allow that to happen. But Nichijou isn't in the same way, and I guess I'll talk about that if I ever make another video about this, since I do believe a little bit of trivia with the manga can actually help with, you know, letting you know how that is. But yeah, I do think it's still worth watching despite, you know, pre-assumptions of what you might like of a comedy or a slice of life. I think it's a bit different where you could probably enjoy it. Since yeah, I do see people say that they didn't like Nichijou because it was this just very average show, but I do think that's just because they didn't really enjoy that aspect of the show, and I don't think that really makes it bad or anything, since a lot of people hold it in high regard. So I could probably understand that, you know, people might feel like they let their expectations go way too high. Anyway, with that being said, I really do hope this video doesn't just get completely obliterated by like copyright or something, so that I can, you know, make more videos and not have this video be taken down or something. I'll try my best to make it as transformative as possible. Sorry YouTube, but, you know, talking over shows just isn't enough, so I'll just do that instead. So until next time, stay safe out there, because this world can be cruel. Alright, later.